The afternoon sun was dipping behind the old highway diner when the bikers' engine settled into a low rumble, the kind of sound that made strangers nervous but made the group feel right at home as they parked their heavy machines in a neat row beside the dusty road. Inside the diner, the group laughed loudly, telling stories only men who had lived 1,000 rough miles could tell, unaware that their day was about to twist in a direction none of them expected. Just as the waitress placed steaming mugs of coffee on their table, the bell above the diner door jingled violently, and everyone turned to see a little girl, no more than 7, with tangled hair and dusty shoes, running toward the men with sheer panic in her white eyes, clutching a small backpack as if it were the last safe thing she had. Her voice trembled as she cried out, "He's coming," the fear in her words slicing through the room like a cold blade, instantly silencing the laughter. The bikers exchanged confused glances, unsure whether it was a prank, a misunderstanding, or something far more serious, but the girl's trembling hands and uneven breathing told them this was no joke. One biker, a tall man with a scar that ran from his jaw to his collarbone, bent down to her level, trying to soften his rough voice as he asked who she meant, but she only shook her head quickly as if speaking more might bring the danger closer. The other bikers straightened, their casual attitudes replaced with focused alertness as the instinct to protect, long buried under years of tough living, began to rise in each of them. The door behind her swung again slightly from her forceful entrance, and every man there felt a strange tension settle into the air, the sense that something, or someone, dangerous was indeed on the way. They didn't know the girl, didn't know her story, and didn't even know her name, but the raw fear shining in her eyes was enough for the bikers to understand that whatever was coming had pushed this small child to run to a group of strangers who looked like trouble just to feel safe. And in that moment, without a word spoken among them, each biker silently decided that whoever she was running from had just become their problem, and they were ready to face it head-on. The bikers had barely processed the girl's final trembling words when the sound of gravel crunching outside made every head in the diner turn sharply toward the windows, their instincts sharpening like knives drawn from old sheaths. The little girl flinched at the noise, squeezing the strap of her backpack until her knuckles turned pale, and the scarred biker gently guided her behind him as if the act were second nature, his broad frame creating an instant shield between her and the unknown. Outside, a dusty pickup truck rolled to a slow stop, the engine coughing out a rough growl as if it too carried the weight of something dark, and through the windshield they could see the silhouette of a man whose posture alone radiated the kind of anger that made the air tighten. The bikers exchanged glances, quick, silent, decisive, and without needing a single verbal cue, several of them rose to their feet simultaneously, their chairs scraping loudly across the tile floor as they formed an instinctive barrier around the child. The waitress, who had watched the scene unfold with growing concern, quietly stepped back behind the counter, knowing this was no ordinary customer dispute. The door of the truck slammed shut with a force that made the diner windows shiver, and a tall, rough-looking man with a thick beard and a hard expression began stalking toward the entrance, his heavy boots leaving sharp imprints in the gravel. The girl whimpered softly, burying her face against the biker's jacket, and the man glanced down at her, his voice low but steady as he told her she was safe now. Another biker, broader even than the first, cracked his knuckles slowly, the sound echoing through the suddenly tense diner like a warning bell. No one spoke, but the unspoken message was clear: whatever business this man thought he had, he wouldn't be handling it the way he expected. The truck's owner shoved open the diner door, the hinges protesting loudly, and the moment he saw the girl hiding behind a wall of leather and steel, his face twisted with a venomous mix of anger and arrogance. He took a step forward, opening his mouth to bark something, but before he could utter a word, one of the bikers stepped up, planting a firm hand on the intruder's chest, stopping him cold. The room was so silent that the ticking of the old wall clock sounded like a heartbeat, and in that charged quiet, the bikers waited, ready for whatever truth was about to explode into their world. The man's face darkened as he found himself abruptly stopped, not used to anyone blocking his path, and he tried to shift his weight forward, but the biker's steady hand didn't budge an inch, creating an immovable wall that made the intruder hesitate for the first time. The bikers behind him subtly widened their stance, forming a quiet semicircle that surrounded him without appearing aggressive, but the message was unmistakably firm. The little girl peeked out from behind the first biker's jacket, her eyes wide and shimmering with a mixture of fear and recognition as she confirmed that the man standing in front of them was indeed the one she had been running from. The intruder attempted a forced smile that failed miserably, revealing a flash of bitterness as he claimed she was his niece and that there had been a misunderstanding, but the way the girl shrank even further made his lie crumble before it finished leaving his lips. The head biker tilted his chin slightly, studying the man with a gaze that was calm but razor-sharp, a look that had made grown men confess the truth more than once, and he asked the girl if she knew him. Her small hand clutched the biker's vest as she silently shook her head, trembling, and that one gesture made the entire room shift emotionally. The man's expression hardened into frustration, and he attempted to reach past the biker, but instantly three larger hands stopped him, none rough enough to escalate things, but firm enough to send a warning through the air. The diner, once warm and filled with chatter, now felt like a courtroom where truth hung thick and heavy, waiting to be revealed. The waitress whispered to the cook in the back to call the sheriff, sensing the situation might turn dangerous. The intruder, realizing he was outnumbered yet unwilling to back down, raised his voice and insisted the girl belonged to him, but his tone carried more threat than concern. The little girl clamped her eyes shut, her breath shaking, and the bikers exchanged one more look, silent communication forged through years of loyalty. The leader leaned down, leveling his eyes with the man's and telling him plainly that if the girl said she wasn't going with him, then the conversation was over. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the metal sign hanging above the diner door, and for a moment it felt as if even the world itself was waiting to see what the man would try next. The man's jaw tightened as he realized the bikers weren't going to be intimidated by his bluster, and a flicker of uncertainty passed across his features, betraying the confidence he had tried so hard to project. He glanced toward the exit as if calculating whether he could force his way out with the girl, but the bikers subtly shifted again, closing any possible gap he might exploit, their movements almost choreographed from years of riding and fighting side by side. The little girl, sensing the rising tension, gripped the biker's vest tighter, her knuckles turning white, and whispered that he had been following her since she left the school playground, her voice so quiet yet so clear that every biker heard it as though it echoed across the room. The revelation sent a ripple of controlled fury through the group, their expressions sharpening not with reckless anger but with a cold, protective focus that made the intruder step back involuntarily. One biker, the quiet one with a scar running along his cheek, asked the man why he was trailing a child alone, and the intruder sputtered out a story about trying to return something she dropped, but when asked what the item was, he couldn't even invent a believable answer. The lie fell apart instantly, leaving him exposed and cornered in both truth and space. A trucker at the counter stood from his stool, adding another layer of silent pressure, while the cook peeked out from the kitchen door, phone still in his hand after contacting the sheriff. The man wiped his palms on his jeans, beads of sweat starting to form at his temple, and he tried to laugh off the accusations, saying everyone was overreacting, but even he could hear the desperation in his own voice. The bikers didn't shout or make threats, their calmness was what truly unnerved him. The leader crouched beside the little girl, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder and asking if she wanted to stay with them, and the moment she nodded, he rose slowly, his gaze returning to the man with a promise of unwavering resolve. The air between them thickened, as if the walls themselves understood that something dangerous lurked beneath the intruder's forced smile. Outside, a car drove past, its radio faintly audible through the window, but nobody in the diner moved or spoke, all eyes locked on the man who was starting to realize he had picked the wrong place and the wrong people to intimidate. The man's breathing grew uneven as he scanned the room again, realizing that every single person inside, bikers, truckers, and even the elderly couple in the corner, was watching him with a level of scrutiny that pierced straight through his strained facade. He lifted his hands slightly, palms out, as if trying to appear harmless, but the gesture only emphasized how nervous he had become, his fingers trembling despite his attempt to keep them still. The biker holding the little girl stepped forward, placing himself squarely between her and the man, his leather boots scraping softly across the worn floor tiles, the sound oddly loud in the otherwise silent diner. The girl buried her face against his vest, but her voice remained clear enough as she whispered that the man had tried to talk her into getting into his car earlier, and the words hit the room like a sudden shift in temperature, sending a new wave of protective tension through everyone present. The man stammered, insisting she misunderstood, but his eyes darted toward the door yet again, revealing his true panic. One biker near the window casually reached up and turned the lock, the click echoing across the room, and though the action was simple, it carried a gravity that made the intruder swallow hard. The cook returned from the kitchen, still holding his phone, and quietly mentioned that the sheriff was already on the way, a statement that visibly shook the man as he tried to calculate how much time he had before law enforcement arrived. The leader took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable yet undeniably commanding, and he asked the man whether he understood how serious the situation had become. The intruder's face twisted into a mixture of frustration and fear as he realized he was outnumbered, outmatched, and completely cut off from any escape route. A tense silence settled in the room.